When Norm announced that he would be continuing the Little Cup series that was started by his expansion for the February Cup with his own iteration, his own take on the March Cup, a lot of people were excited to see that this may be an event that becomes a progression, a series of events that happen perhaps throughout Little War Games here. Certainly we're going to see how long it continues. However, a lot of ire came upon Norm almost immediately when it was revealed that his bracket would be, first of all, single elimination, and second of all, it would be taking a show match-like approach, rather than pitting the players in seeding 1 to 16 and then pitting 1 against 16, 2 against 15, 8 against 7, no, 8 against 9, things of that nature, and moving on like people expected with a double elimination bottom component. He instead would be pitting people up against one another based on what made interesting matchups. Prankster Gangster versus Rhinus was in there, for instance. People that I ranked very highly in my power ranking for the March Cup event itself. Yummy Blah and AC were up against each other in the first round. Mentors and students were facing off against one another. It became clear that the entire purpose of Norm's event was to run an event that was something of a more fun and laid-back event than the February Cup that preceded it. But this immediately came into the furore of the community, and a lot of people didn't like this. How do you mean that there is seeding, but all these strong players are playing against each other? What do you mean it's single elimination? The last one was double elimination. Yes, I know that you haven't done these kind of tournaments very often in Little War Games history, if ever before, but why have you done it this way instead of that way? And I actually think that leads into an excellent conversation about what kind of tournament formats we want in Little War Game, or more generally, what does it mean to have different tournament formats, and the different goals and aspirations that these formats have. And so I'm going to start with this very simply at the beginning. When you're making a tournament format, make sure that you figure out what your event is, make sure you have a goal for the event, and then make sure that you use a format that's in line with the goal for the event. I'll explain what I mean with a couple of fairly in-depth examples. So, let's say that the goal for your event is to find out, like the February Cup event tried to, who is the best among the players that signed up. If this is the case, you seed all of the players, you pit them against one another, and then you provide a double elimination component, such that, let's say there's 16 players, 1 and 16, 8 and 9, 10 and 7. These players play against each other, the loser gets dropped down into the loser's bracket, and then all of these will be played over the course of best of 3s, until you get to the semifinals and beyond, which will then be played in best of 5. Individuals who fall down to the lower bracket or the loser's bracket can come back up through it to fight the person at the end who made it all the way to the winner's bracket finals. However, the person in the winner's bracket has yet to lose a tournament life, so the person coming from the lower bracket will have to win not 1 but 2 best of 5s in order to overcome that person. That's a hefty advantage given to the person for not having dropped any matches previously in the series. And the goal there is obvious. We want to find out who's the best. Note the ways that the format supports it. There's seeding, there's second chance opportunity, best of 3s. The deeper in the tournament you go, the more that you have best of 5s. There's even a re-go for the finals into the grand finals in the event that there is a bracket reset and the person from the lower end does manage to make the Cinderella run all the way up through the lower bracket and come back into the intersection point with the winner's bracket. But that is just one goal for an event. Let's take another event. Let's say that you wanted to make an open tournament. The goal was to get as many people to play in this open tournament as possible, but you're not concerned about the quality of the games. In fact, because it's an open event, you deliberately want to see some variance among the people who are at the top level. But because it's an open event, you have a lot of people playing. Well, a format might come about that is very useful in an open tournament style. For instance, normally, it's not a good idea to have single elimination best of 1s. But if the goal is we want to get as many people playing as possible, and we want everyone to feel like they have a chance, then that way more experienced players can't as heftily, as easily leverage their advantage because every game is the knife line that they have to fight on. They have no room for error. And with which to leverage their experience over a series, then yeah, that could be a successful event. If your goal is to have, as I said, let's say 64 or 128 people, and you want best of 1s, you just want it to be quick, snap, game, moving on as follows. And here's the thing. The downside of that event is that you don't have all of the strongest people necessarily winning the event. You cannot say that the winner of that event is the strongest player in the tournament. In fact, it's very unlikely. It's almost done that way by design. It's meant to give a sense of variance and possibility. I mean, look at the NBA, for an example, if you don't believe that this is used elsewhere. Now let's go back to what the downside was of the February Cup. The downside of the February Cup was that if you run too many events that are too skill-intensive like this, then people are not going to want to join if they don't see that they have a chance of winning or coming back up to the semifinals. So, for instance, if you are the player, let's say out of the 16 people in the February Cup, let's say that you were honestly ranked at number 10. In the future, if only February Cup style events get run and there's not sufficient prize money or points or other forms of validation, or you don't have internal motivation to do so, then you're not going to take part in those tournaments, because why would I join if I'm number 10 out of 16? That's not the attitude I personally take, but that is the knock-on effect of having this format, that you're going to dissuade those people who have almost no chance of getting to even in semifinals and competing in best of fives from wanting to play your event. However, what's the downside of the open man 64, 128-man single elimination tournament? Well, the upside is that you can run your event very, very smoothly and easily, and you know exactly what you're waiting on, and the rounds have a very short timer attached to them. The downside is that you won't know who necessarily the best player of the event was. You'll just know the person who won the event, and those are not the same thing. When I say that the goal for your event also has to have a format that aligns with that goal, that also means that the type of event is extremely important. So for instance, if ever there was a little war game, let's say a major, let's say there was some large event that happens once a year in Little War Game, once every 6 months, let's say, where all we want to do is celebrate like the game and all the players of the game and all of their skill and make it something about how cool this game is and how good the players are and all of that. Well, it wouldn't be in line with the spirit of the event as a world championship, as like a little war game championship, as a celebration of the game, for you to then say, I'm going to arrange the matches so that this person fights this person, and then these people fight each other, and then this is going to happen, and yes, normally number 1 and number 2 would be in the finals, but I'll make them in the first round, yes! That kind of destroys the competitive integrity when the event is naturally, by what it is, by its description, emphasizing that it wants to go into the competitive integrity. It really wants to know who is the best. But again, you can also have event types for the form. You can have a format that doesn't fit the event type in another way. So again, let's say the goal is to get as many people into Little War Game as possible and have a tournament that celebrates that. And let's say it was directly trying to attract newer players. Let's say that like somehow you got like 64 big YouTubers and big streamers, and you wanted them to play Little War Game. Well, the quality of the event isn't going to be too great in terms of competitive integrity. Some people would be much better than others. There would be heavy skill stratification. And additionally, lots of people are coming from different areas and rounds of experience. If you just make it about who is the best, absolutely and entirely, it's going to be difficult for that actually to work for you in a timing sense. So maybe it would be better off to have the matchup of personalities. After all, the people in this hypothetical tournament are YouTubers and streamers and people who put themselves in front of the camera on a constant basis. So these are people who you want to get the force of their personality out. The game is like a secondary vehicle for communicating who they are and what they enjoy. So it wouldn't very much make sense for it to have like a GSL-style format where everyone is seated into groups of 4, and then only the top 2 get out, and then all these people play best of 3s or best of 5s to advance all the way through. Yeah, we would find out who was the best at the end of that event, but that would be a very grueling, competitively minded event that wouldn't take into account the fact that we are, conceptually in this hypothetical, deliberately attracting people who are known for their personality and for their following and for the interesting things that they do and they bring to a screen and the ways that they liven up the lives of the viewers and the other people who enjoy their content. Here's another thing that's really important. Not all players are going to agree with your format. No matter what format you make, it's not going to agree. In fact, not only will not all players agree, not all players in the tournament will agree with the format. So let's say that you did have like a tournament that was more February Cup style, where people go about and they get ranked 1 to 16, and then they play against each other, and there's a double elimination tournament. Well, I've already said that's excellent for figuring out who the absolute best is, but not all players will agree then that, let's say, the finals should be best of 5 or best of 7. Like, they might agree maybe the goal of the tournament is to find out who the best player is, but the format that would require that could be something like best of 5 in the first round, best of 7 all the way through the middle portion of the tournament, and then best of 9 at the end. That's logistically a nightmare. It's entirely too taxing on the players, and not all of the players involved are going to want to do that, especially if they think scores are going to be entirely lopsided. While they say that they want all of their tournament games to be finished and to figure out who is the best, they don't necessarily want to put the time in to make it a conclusive, like, best of 21 or something like that. No one has time for that. Additionally, let's say that you take the February Cup tournament as it was. Well, maybe that format is something that the person who is naturally ranked 15th or 14th is going to disagree about. As is normal when you rank players 1 to 16 and put them in a double elimination style tournament, numbers 1 and 16 will fight against each other. 2 and 15, 3 and 14, so on. And as long as the numbers add up to 17, the number 16 player in your tournament is heavily going to disagree with the idea that they have to go up against the tournament favorite, and then what? They get bounced by that person down into the loser's bracket, and now they have to fight whoever loses between numbers 8 and 9 when they're number 16. Like, they're going to have a very brief, miserable gaming experience with regards to the tournament, and that is just because of the tournament they signed up for and the placing that they have received. Let's go the other way. Obviously, for Norm's March Cup, if he's pitting AC versus Yummy Blah Blah in an initial round, that's fantastic news for those same players. What do you mean we don't have to deal with both of these players at the same time? What do you mean they can't go through the lower bracket after one of them inevitably loses? Because that's the way competition works. One of them must lose, and then they can come sweep back all the way through and just wipe my chances out. This is fantastic. This kind of madness is actually great for mid-table or even slightly below mid-table players. Like, oh, you're show matching me against my mentor, against someone that is of my skill level, rather than just someone who can dumpster me, because that's the way that normal competitive ranked 1 to 16 double elimination tournaments work. They're going to have a great time of that. Not all the people who are watching your event are going to agree with the format. If you're a super competitively minded person and you want to find out who the absolute best player is, you almost find the idea of like an open 128 person single elimination best of one tournament format to be anathema to you. It's almost the antithesis of all the things that you watch about the game and you play the game for and you enjoy about the game that you want to see from these players. If, however, you're a person who's just like, I just kind of want to see some wet, wild, and fun matches, then maybe you don't necessarily want a super competitively stacked tournament, because, as I said, one of the downsides of those events is that the initial rounds can feel very boring and played out and staid. So, yeah, number 3 and number 14 are playing against one another. One of them is the heavy favorite, and depending, in the context of Little War Game, the difference between the number 3 player and the number 14 player in a tournament that has even an approximation of the top listing of players is going to be so absolutely massive that the number 14 player has, barring internet difficulties on the part of the number 3 player, next to no chance of actually winning that game. So all the players aren't going to agree. All the people watching the event aren't going to agree. Maybe even the people hosting the different events won't themselves agree. And that's actually fine. That's one of the things that I like about the Little Cup series, if it does go forward with Norm's vision of the March Cup. It's as follows. The February Cup, very, very stacked, like a pretty stacked, very competitively minded event. The March Cup, bit more fun, bit looser, bit not going to go as long, fewer restrictions. Like, it's just going to be, Norm playing God Emperor, trying to set people up as pieces and then see where they clash together. Like, this is something interesting and different. And the thing is, you need different formats. There is no best format. Now, there is a best format for what you are going for your event. That can take some time to figure out what it is. But for instance, if we were to say, what's the best format for creating a fun show match environment? Okay, that's different than the best format for creating this is the Little War Game, like, World Championship, like, grand finale, where we want to see everyone to see who is absolutely positively the best no matter what. But you need to have those tournaments have different formats, and you need the formats to have different feel. Because the thing that happened in Little War Games history was that there did used to be tournaments run on a monthly basis. The problem with all of these tournaments is that they actually would have the same format, and thus they have the same feel. It no longer becomes interesting to the players if every format is a best, 8 or 16 players seeded double elimination tournament. Because at the current skill stratification of Little War Game, it becomes very obvious who is going to win, and the people who have signed up that have no chance whatsoever. That discourages those people at the bottom. They don't want to play anymore. That discourages viewers because they don't want to see the same matchup over and over. It gets to the point where the top players that are constantly butting heads in the finals simply say, why are we playing in a whole event when we can just play a best of 5 between the two of us, make it a show match, and there we go. We'll just cut out all the chaff and all the fluff. And they stop attending these large events too, because, hey, without us, this doesn't have any legitimacy. But if you have tournaments that have different feels and you spice it up, because variety being the spice of life here, if variety is the thing that you bring in with all of these different tournament formats, then maybe it's one every 2 or 3 months that one of these Cup Series events is run more competitively minded with a format that is more in tune to those higher level players. And maybe that's the thing that they want to play. And in fact, the fact that that is the event that they want to play in kind of pushes aside all the discontent that they've had for the previous months. Because, as I said, in Little War Games history, if you go double elimination, seeded double, seeded double, seeded double, seeded double, seeded double, you do that for 5 months in a row, by about month 3, people are going to be tired of it. If you space out what the formats are over the course of the year, you give them to different people who have different ideas, and maybe they're not the most competitively minded. Maybe they don't appeal to the highest strata of players. Maybe they don't appeal to the most bottom or newest stratum of players. What's important is that you find different tournament formats that have different feels because they attract different players. And the difference and the small amount of discontentment that exists when people don't get to play, especially competitively minded players, when they don't get to play a format that they think is real or is a good test of their skill, that actually is what drives their incentive and motivation to go ahead and play those kind of tournaments in the future. So you need different tournament formats, because if you don't have different tournament formats and you don't have a different tournament feel, then you're not going to have enough players. You're not going to attract the interest, and players are the vehicle that drive the tournament, never the other way around. If you enjoy the content that I make on this channel, or for the Little Wargame RTS channel on Twitch, or throughout any other space that involves Little Wargame, please consider subscribing to the Patreon link in the description box below.